I found out my twin sister had been secretly living my life for 3 months, wearing my clothes, using my name, and sleeping with my fiancé Estine. The worst part, nobody noticed she wasn't me, not my friends, not my colleagues, and definitely not Blake, the man who had proposed with tears in his eyes just 4 months earlier. I stood frozen in the doorway of my own apartment, watching my mirror image lounging on my couch, scrolling through my phone, wearing my favorite sweater. Surprise, I said, my voice barely audible as I dropped my luggage with a thud. Ava didn't even flinch. She looked up slowly, a small smile playing at the corner of her lips. My lips, but somehow different when she wore them. You are early, she said, setting down my phone. Flight got rerouted. What are you doing in my apartment? I managed to ask. Even as the evidence was everywhere, her toiletries on my coffee table, my photos rearranged, the subtle scent of her different perfume contaminating my space, your apartment. Ava laughed, stretching her legs out on my couch. Maya, we both know you were never coming back from Africa. That was the plan, wasn't it? You'd stay there with your precious research while I took care of things here. My heart raced as I tried to process what was happening. Ava and I hadn't spoken in almost a year before my departure to lead a medical research project in Ghana. Our relationship had always been complicated, identical in appearance, but opposite in nature. I was the careful planner. She was the impulsive risk taker. I built things. She took them apart. There was no plan, I said, stepping further into the apartment. I told you I'd be gone for 3 months, that's it. Ava stood up, and it was like looking in a mirror, except for the subtle differences only I would notice. Her hair was cut slightly different than how I wore mine. Her nails were longer, painted, a shade I would never choose. I've made some improvements while you've been gone, she said, gesturing around. Blake loves the new living room arrangement, by the way, and your boss thinks your work on the foundation project has never been better. I felt sick. You've been going to my job, XT to my colleagues. I've been living your life, sis, Ava said with a shrug. And honestly, I am better at being Tedish Thompson than you ever were. The sound of keys in the door cut our conversation short. Before I could react, the door swung open and Blake walked in, his familiar aftershave hitting me a second before he appeared. My heart leapt at the sight of him, his dark curls, the tired smile after a long day of work. Hey babe, he said. Eyes locked on Ava, he crossed the room and kissed her deeply, one hand around her waist, the other holding a bouquet of sunflowers, my favorite. When they broke apart, Blake finally turned and noticed me. His brow furrowed in confusion as his eyes darted between us. What the hell, he whispered, taking a step back. Ava smiled, sliding her arm around his waist. Blake, remember I told you about my twin sister? Well, surprise. Chusez is back from Africa. The way he looked at me like I was the stranger, the intruder, made my blood run cold. In his eyes I saw no recognition, no love, just confusion and wariness. Twin sister, he repeated, looking completely lost. You never told me you had a twin? Blake, it's me, I said, stepping forward. I am Taj, your fiancé Rifet. We met at Riley's gallery opening 3 years ago. You proposed at Lake Geneva last winter. Blake's face contorted in confusion as he looked between us. What are you talking about? Tasis doesn't have a sister. Ava laughed, the sound unnervingly similar to my own. See what I mean, babe? This is exactly what my therapist warned us about. She turned to me with false sympathy. Mia, we've been over this. You need to stop claiming to be me. It's not healthy. What? I felt like I was drowning. Blake, we lived together for 2 years. You know me? The real me? Blake's expression hardened as Ava leaned in to whisper something in his ear. When he looked back at me, there was only suspicion in his eyes. You need to leave, he said firmly. Before I call the police, check your phone, I demanded. Look at pictures from before 3 months ago. You'll see I am the real Tejich. Blake hesitated, then pulled out his phone. As he scrolled through images, I saw confusion flash across his face. He turned to Ava. These older photos do look different? Of course they do, Ava said smoothly. Remember I told you about my health scare? The medication made me gain weight temporarily. That's why I look different in the older pictures. My mind raced as I tried to think of something only the real Tedage would know. Blake, on our first date, you spilled red wine on my white dress and you gave me your jacket to cover it up. A flicker of doubt crossed his face. She's been stalking us, Ava said quickly. She knows these details because she's obsessed with my life. Dr. Matthews warned us she might try this. I pulled out my passport from my bag. Look, my identification. Ava snatched it from my hands. This is a fake. She's had it made to try to steal my identity. That's insane, I protested. Blake, you know me, you know enough, Blake shouted, his hand shaking as he pointed toward the door. You need professional help. Please leave now or I am calling the police. I felt tears streaming down my face as I backed toward the door. How had Ava done this? How had she erased me so completely in just 3 months? This isn't over, I said, my voice breaking. I am going to prove who I am. Outside my own apartment, I leaned against the wall, trying to catch my breath. I needed help. I needed someone who would believe me. My first thought was Riley, my best friend since college. She would know me, the real me. I fumbled with my phone but discovered my banking app wouldn't open. The password had been changed. My email prompted for security questions with answers I didn't recognize. Even my social media accounts were inaccessible. Ava had thought of everything. Using my remaining cash, I took a taxi to Riley's apartment, rehearsing what I would say when Riley opened the door. Her smile faltered. Maya, what happened to your hair? I just saw you yesterday and it was... Riley, I need your help, I interrupted. I'm the real Tedage. The person you saw yesterday was my twin sister Ava. Riley's expression shifted from confusion to concern. Mia, you are scaring me. Is this some kind of joke? You've never mentioned having a twin, because we've been estranged for years, I explained desperately. Remember when we went to Cabo San Lucas for spring break during our junior year? You got sunburned so bad that you couldn't wear a bra for a week, and we joked about how you were freeing the nipple before it was trending. Maya told me that story last week at dinner. My heart sank. Ava had been systematically gathering my memories, my stories, building her case for being me. That's because she's been pretending to be me. Riley, please, you have to believe me. She's stolen my life. Riley hesitated, then pulled out her phone. I am calling Blake. He needs to know you are here. No. I lunged for her phone, but she pulled back. Mia texted me last night, Riley said cautiously, warning me that her mentally ill cousin might show up claiming to be her. Said she's had issues with identity confusion before. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Ava hadn't just been living my life. She'd been systematically destroying my credibility, laying groundwork to discredit me when I returned. As Riley made the call, I fled down the stairs, my mind racing. I needed evidence, proof of my identity that Ava couldn't have tampered with. But most of all, I needed to understand how she had pulled this off and why my own parents hadn't warned me their other daughter was impersonating me. The drive to my parents' house in Fairfield took nearly 2 hours, giving me plenty of time to cycle through panic, anger, and confusion. Mom and Dad had always struggled with our twin dynamic, often treating us as a unit rather than individuals, but they had to recognize their own daughter, didn't they? I hadn't called ahead, afraid that Ava might have already poisoned that well too. As I pulled into the familiar driveway of my childhood home, I noticed Dad's car was gone, but Mom's was parked in its usual spot. My hand trembled as I rang the doorbell, suddenly feeling like a stranger at my own home. The door opened, and Mom's face registered shock before settling into a careful neutrality. "Mia," she said, her voice oddly formal. "This is unexpected." "Mom, it's really me," I said, my voice cracking. "Ava's been pretending to be me. She's living in my apartment, working my job, and Blake doesn't even recognize me." Mom glanced nervously over her shoulder before stepping onto the porch and closing the door behind her. "You shouldn't have come here." Her words hit me like a slap. "What?" "Mom, I need your help. Keep your voice down," she whispered harshly. "Your father can't handle this right now. His heart condition." "Can't handle what? The truth? That Ava has stolen my identity?" Mom's eyes flashed with something like guilt. "It's complicated, Tazich," I repeated, my voice rising despite her warning. "What's complicated about your daughter needing help?" She took my arm and led me to the side of the house, away from neighboring windows. "Ava came to us 3 months ago, right after you left. She was desperate, in debt, running from some people she owed money to. She just needed a place to stay temporarily, to use your address for a few weeks, and you let her take over my entire life." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It wasn't supposed to go this far, Mom insisted, but then she started talking about how much better things were going for her as you, how people responded to her differently. I felt sick. "So you just let her keep being me?" She said. "You two had an arrangement," Mom admitted, not meeting my eyes, "that you were tired of your life here and wanted a fresh start in Africa, that you'd given her permission." The betrayal cut deep. My own mother had believed such an obvious lie without even checking with me. "I would never do that," I said, my voice barely audible. "You know me, Mom. You know I wouldn't abandon my life, my career, my fiancé." Something flickered in her eyes, doubt, perhaps, but then she straightened her shoulders. "Ava says you've had a breakdown, that you are not thinking clearly." Over me. I couldn't keep the hurt from my voice. Before she could answer, Dad's car pulled into the driveway. Mom stiffened. "You need to go," she urged. "Your father's been doing better, but this kind of stress. I am not leaving until you both hear the truth," I insisted. When he spotted me, he froze, the color draining from his face. "Richard, go inside," Mom called out. "Everything's fine." But Dad was already storming toward us, his face tight with anger. "What are you doing here? We had an agreement." "Dad, it's me, Tadej," I pleaded. "The real Tadej." "Ava has been enough," he shouted, slamming the groceries down on the lawn. "We're done enabling this behavior. Your sister is finally getting her life together, and here you are trying to destroy it all over again." The world seemed to tilt beneath me. "What are you talking about? I am Tadej." Dad's eyes narrowed. "Then here's your birthmark? The one on your left shoulder?" I automatically reached for my shoulder, confused. "I don't have a birthmark." "Exactly," Dad said, his voice cold. "Maya has had that mark since birth. You may look like her, Ava, but you've never fooled me." In that moment I realized the horrible truth. Ava hadn't just stolen my identity, she had rewritten it, fabricated details that only the real Tadej would have, creating a version of me that I couldn't possibly match. "Dad, I am not," I began, but was cut off by the sound of approaching sirens. "I texted Ava when you arrived," she said. "She said we needed to get you help." As the police car pulled up to the curb, I saw my entire life crumbling around me. The officers approached cautiously, one hand on their belts. "Ma'am," one officer said, "we received a call about a woman harassing this family and making concerning statements." "Are you Ava Thompson?" "No," I cried. "I am Adej Thompson. She's the imposter." The officers exchanged looks I recognized all too well from my medical training. The look that said they were dealing with someone unstable. "She needs psychiatric evaluation," Dad said firmly. "Her therapist, Dr. Matthews, has all her information. She's been refusing medication for months." As the officers guided me toward their car, I caught a glimpse of my mother's face. For just a moment, doubt clouded her features, but she said nothing as they took me away. The psychiatric hold unit at Mercy Hospital was all too familiar to me, not as a patient, but as a doctor who had occasionally consulted there. The irony wasn't lost on me as a nurse secured my belongings and led me to a sparse room with a single bed. "Dr. Anderson will be in to evaluate you shortly," she said, her voice professionally detached. "I am not mentally ill," I insisted. "I am a doctor myself. I work at Boston Memorial in immunology research. Please, check my credentials." The nurse Hernametag read Diane gave me a sympathetic look. "Everyone here will listen to your concerns, but you need to stay calm and cooperate with the process." After she left, I sat on the edge of the bed trying to organize my thoughts. Whatever Ava's endgame was, she had planned it meticulously. She had leveraged our identical appearance, studied my life, and positioned herself as the real Tadej while painting me as the unstable twin. The perfect identity theft executed by the one person who could actually pass as me. When Dr. Anderson finally arrived, he brought a tablet and a calm demeanor. "Miss Thompson," he began, "I understand you believe you are your twin sister, Tazich." "I don't believe I am Tadej, I am Adej," I corrected. "My twin sister Ava has taken over my identity while I was working in Ghana on a medical research project." He made a note. "And this research project, can you tell me about it?" For the next hour, I detailed my work on tropical disease vaccines, my education at Johns Hopkins, my residency at Mayo Clinic, anything to establish the depth of my knowledge and the reality of my identity. Dr. Anderson listened attentively, making occasional notes. "Your knowledge is impressively detailed," he acknowledged, "but dissociative disorders can manifest in complex ways." "This isn't a psychiatric issue," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "This is fraud, honidity theft. Please, just contact Dr. Samuel Chen at Boston Memorial. He's the head of my department." "We'll look into these claims," Dr. Anderson promised, though his tone suggested he was humoring me. After he left, I paced the small room, feeling the walls closing in. Without my phone or access to my contacts, I had no way to reach anyone who might help me. Ava had effectively isolated me from everyone in my life. That evening, Diane returned with my medication. As she checked my wristband, I noticed her lingering on my face. "You said you were in Ghana?" she asked suddenly, her voice low. "Yes, for a research project on tropical disease vaccines," I replied, hope flickering. "My brother works with Daughters Without Borders there," she said. When I mentioned an American doctor named Adej Thompson during our call last week, he recognized the name, said you developed a promising approach to combating a resistant strain. My heart leapt. "Yes, that's my work. Can you contact him? He can confirm who I am." Diane hesitated, then glanced toward the door. "I shouldn't get involved in patient cases, please," I whispered. "I am not supposed to be a patient. My twin sister has stolen my life, and no one believes me. Something in my desperation must have reached her. I'll see what I can find out," she promised. "But I need you to stay calm and follow the protocol here. Any outbursts will just reinforce force what's in your file. The next morning I received an unexpected visitor. Riley stood awkwardly in the doorway of the common room, her face a mixture of concern and wariness. They said I could speak with you for 15 minutes, she said, sitting across from me. I didn't think you'd come, I admitted. Riley studied my face carefully. Something's been bothering me 2 days ago at lunch. Tykes, for whoever she is, didn't recognize the waiter at Raleigh Luna, but you and I have been going there for years. He always remembers your order. A tiny spark of hope ignited in my chest. She doesn't have our history, Riley. I don't know what to believe, Riley said, but I've known Tessage Thompson for 11 years, and something feels off about her now. She leaned forward. Tell me something only the real Tedges would know. You never told anyone but me, because you were afraid it would affect your grade. You broke it off when you found out he was seeing 3 other students. Riley's eyes widened. She told me she never liked him for me, because she doesn't know the full story, I said urgently. She only knows fragments of my life, whatever she could piece together from social media, conversations, photos. Riley took a deep breath. I am not saying I believe you entirely, but I am willing to help you prove who you are. What do you need? Before I could answer, Diane appeared at the door, signaling discreetly. Your blood test came back, she said loudly for anyone listening, then in a whisper, my brother sent something Aminin from your colleague in Ghana, DNA profile from your research work. I felt a surge of hope, scientific evidence. The one thing Ava couldn't fabricate. Riley, I said urgently, I need you to get that information to Dr. Anderson, and I need you to look into something else. My parents, find out what Ava has on them, why they're protecting her. As Riley left, promising to return the next day, I felt the first real hope since discovering Ava in my apartment. The truth was coming to light. I just needed to stay strong long enough to reclaim my life. The DNA evidence from Ghana proved to be my salvation. After comparing it with samples taken during my evaluation, Dr. Anderson could no longer deny the scientific reality. I was who I claimed to be. 3 days after my admission, he signed my release papers. I owe you an apology, Dr. Thompson, he said as we completed the discharge process. Your case is unprecedented in my experience. Identity theft usually doesn't involve an identical twin, I acknowledged. But the question remains, why did my parents go along with it? Riley was waiting for me outside the hospital, leaning against her car. Seeing her felt like the first familiar thing in a world turned upside down. I have something you need to see, she said, handing me a thick manila envelope as I slid into the passenger seat. Inside was a stack of documents, financial records, emails, and what appeared to be legal papers. I flipped through them, confusion mounting with each page. Where did you get these? I asked. I may have convinced the temp at your parents' lawyer's office that I was their estate planner's assistant, Riley admitted. Turns out Taurus Thompson isn't the only one with secrets in that family. The documents told a story I never could have imagined. 6 months later, they adopted another infant girl from a private adoption agency and named her Tayesh. Me. I am adopted, I whispered the words, feeling foreign on my tongue. To hear is more, Riley said gently. Your parents never registered the adoption properly. The lawyer they used was later disbarred for facilitating questionable adoptions. Pifford, you have no legal record of adoption, just a birth certificate that lists them as your birth parents, which is fraudulent. The implications hit me like a physical blow. So legally, you may not exist as their daughter, Riley confirmed. And Ava knows it. Look at the last page. It was an email from Ava to my parents, dated just before my trip to Ghana. If Hazes ever discovers the truth, it could ruin all of us. The foundation money is tied to Richard's family line biological descendants only. If anyone investigates her background, we could lose everything. Not to mention the questions about where she really came from. The pieces suddenly clicked into place. My parents' medical research foundation, which funded my work and supported dozens of researchers, was established with money from my father's family, old money with strict bloodline requirements. The reason they never told me I was adopted wasn't just emotional. It was financial, so when Ava showed up claiming to be me, I began. They faced an impossible choice, Riley finished. Expose the fraudulent adoption and lose the foundation funding, or go along with Ava's scheme temporarily. But why would Ava do this? I asked, still struggling to make sense of it all. What does she gain? Riley handed me her phone, open to a news article from 3 months ago. Thompson Foundation through could be worth billions. The article detailed how the foundation's lead researcher me was on the verge of a breakthrough in tropical disease treatment that pharmaceutical companies were already lining up to license. Your research in Ghana was the final piece, Riley explained. The patent will be worth a fortune. And according to the foundation bylaws, the lead researcher gets 30% of all licensing proceeds. I sat back, stunned. She's not just stealing my identity, she's stealing my life's work. And your parents are too terrified of losing everything to stop her, Riley added, as we pulled up to Riley's apartment building, my temporary sanctuary until I could sort out this mess. A plan was already forming in my mind. We need to confront them all together, I said. Not at home, not at my apartment. Somewhere public where Ava can't control the narrative. Riley nodded. The Thompson Foundation Gala is tomorrow night. X-Men will be there, donors, researchers, board members, and the guest of honor is the foundation's star researcher, I added grimly. Maya Thompson, are you sure you are ready for this? Riley asked, concern evident in her voice. I thought about everything Ava had taken from me, my home, my relationship, my career, and nearly my sanity. But she had made one critical mistake. She had tried to steal my research without understanding it. The work I had dedicated my life to couldn't be faked with a few memorized talking points. I've never been more ready for anything in my life, I said. A new determination hardening within me. Tonight, I would reclaim my truth. And tomorrow, I would reclaim my life. The Thompson Foundation annual gala transformed the Boston Museum of Science into a glittering showcase of wealth and scientific achievement. As Riley and I approached the entrance, I felt oddly calm. After days of fighting to prove my identity, I was finally ready to take back my narrative. Remember the plan, Riley whispered as we showed our invitations courtesy of her connections at the museum. We wait until her speech, then present the evidence inside. The atrium buzzed with Boston's elite mingling among interactive displays highlighting the foundation's work. My work, at the center stood a large presentation of my Ghana research, complete with before and after images of treatment results, and there holding court beside it was Ava. She wore an emerald dress I had never seen before, her hair styled in an elegant updo that I would have considered too formal. Blake stood proudly at her side, his hand possessively at her waist as she charmed a group of donors. Dr. Thompson's breakthrough could change the treatment landscape for millions, I overheard a board member saying. We're fortunate to have such brilliance in our organization. Ava smiled modestly. The real heroes are the patients who participated in our trials. Their courage inspired every aspect of our approach. The ease with which she spoke about my research, my patients, my experiences, made my blood boil. She had memorized talking points but lacked the passion and deep understanding understanding that came from actually doing the work. I navigated the crowd carefully, keeping my distance while observing her interactions. My parents stood nearby, my father beaming with pride while my mother's smile seemed more strained. They had no idea I was there, yet. It's almost time for the speeches, Riley noted, checking her watch. Are you sure you don't want to approach her privately first? No, I said firmly. This needs to happen publicly. Too many people have been deceived. The foundation director tapped his glass, calling for attention as he approached the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to introduce the woman whose groundbreaking research has brought us all here tonight, Dr. Tevis Thompson. Applause filled the hall as Ava made her way to the stage. Confidence in every step, I moved closer, positioning myself near the front of the crowd. Thank you for that warm welcome, Ava began, her voice carrying through the hall. The past year has been an incredible journey of discovery. As she launched into her prepared remarks, I caught sight of Dr. Chen, my department head, nodding along in the audience. Had he truly not noticed the differences between us? Or had Ava's performance been that convincing? The breakthrough came during our third month in Ghana, Ava continued, when we identified a unique protein marker that allowed us to target the pathogen without damaging surrounding tissue. I chose that moment to step forward. Interesting, I said loudly, my voice cutting through her speech. Because the protein marker was actually identified in month 2. The third month was spent developing the delivery mechanism. A hush fell over the crowd as all eyes turned to me. Ava froze mid-sentence, her composed facade cracking as she stared at her own face, looking back at her from the audience. What's happening? Someone whispered loudly. Is that? Another voice began. Ava recovered quickly, forcing a laugh. Well, this is unexpected. Ladies and gentlemen, my twin sister Ava has decided to join us tonight. I am not Ava, I said calmly, stepping closer to the stage. I am Dr. Azaz Thompson, the actual researcher who developed this treatment protocol in Ghana. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I saw my parents pushing through the audience, panic on their faces. I'm afraid my sister has been struggling with some serious identity issues, Ava continued smoothly. We've been trying to get her the help she needs. Is that why you had me committed to a psychiatric facility under false pretenses? I challenged. To keep me from exposing your fraud? I caught Blake's confused expression as he looked between us. Dr. Chen, I called out, turning to my department head. During our last review meeting before I left for Gono, what specific concern did you raise about the trial protocol? Dr. Chen blinked, thrown by the direct question. Hi. I questioned whether the sample size was adequate for the third phase. And what was my response? I pressed. He frowned, thinking, you said you'd expand the control group by including the regional hospital patients, which we did, I confirmed, resulting in the data set on page 87 of the research findings, a section that my sister here hasn't mentioned once because she doesn't understand its significance. Ava's composure began to crack. This is ridiculous, security. Please remove her. Riley stepped forward, then holding up her phone. Before anyone goes anywhere, I think everyone should see this. On the large presentation screen behind Ava, Riley projected the DNA profile from Ghana alongside my hospital test results. These are identical DNA profiles, Riley explained. One from Dr. Tevis Thompson's research work in Ghana 3 weeks ago, and one from hospital samples taken 2 days ago, scientific proof of identity. The room erupted in confused conversation. I saw board members huddling, security guards looking uncertain, and my parents having a heated whispered argument. Blake pushed his way toward the stage, his face a mask of bewilderment. What the hell is going on? I'll tell you what's going on, I said, my voice rising above the chaos. For 3 months, Ava has been impersonating me, taking credit for my work, living in my home, and I paused, meeting his eyes directly, sleeping in my bed. Blake's face drained of color as he turned to Ava. Is this true? Are you not Alves? Before she could answer, my father stepped forward. Everyone, please. This is a private family matter that has gotten out of hand. Private? I echoed incredulously. You told the police I was mentally ill when I came to you for help. We had no choice. My mother blurted out, tears in her eyes. She threatened to expose everything if we didn't go along with it. The foundation director stepped between us. Expose what exactly? My mother looked at my father, who seemed to age 10 years on the spot. He nodded resignedly. That Tezish was adopted, he admitted quietly, and that the adoption wasn't entirely above board. A shocked silence fell over the room. Ava laughed bitterly from the stage. Tell them the rest, Dad. Tell them about the foundation bylaw that requires all beneficiaries to be biological Thompson descendants. Tell them how you've been committing fraud for 29 years. The director turned to my father, horror dawning on his face. Richard, is this true? As my father struggled to respond, Ava locked eyes with me, her expression hardening. This research is worth billions, she hissed, just loud enough for me to hear. Half of it should have been mine by birthright. I am just taking what I deserve. In that moment, surrounded by the ruins of the life we had both claimed, I finally understood the depth of Ava's resentment. While I had been raised as the cherished daughter, given every opportunity to succeed, she had always known she was second best in our parents' eyes, despite being their only biological child. The research doesn't belong to either of us personally, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. It belongs to the patients who will benefit from it. I turned to the foundation director. The truth about my adoption changes nothing about the validity of the work. The treatment protocol is sound, and it should move forward regardless of who gets credit or compensation. My words seemed to break the spell of chaos. The director nodded slowly, signaling to security. I think we need to continue this discussion privately. If everyone could please give the Thompson family some space. As the crowd reluctantly began to disperse, Blake approached me hesitantly. How do I know which one of you is telling the truth? I met his gaze steadily. Ask me when we first said I love you? His brow furrowed. It was after the charity gala last year in the car on the way home. I shook my head. It was a Tuesday night. We were ordering takeout, and you blurted it out when I agreed to try the spicy noodles you like. Then you got embarrassed and tried to pretend you were talking to the food. Recognition dawned in his eyes. Maya. Before he could say more, security began ushering us toward a private room. As we moved through the crowd, I caught Ava's venomous glare. This isn't over, she mouthed. And somehow, despite everything, I believed her. 1 month after the gala, I sat in my lawyer's office signing the final paperwork that officially ended the most surreal chapter of my life. The settlement was complex. In exchange for not pressing criminal charges against Ava and my parents, I received full control of my research, a formal acknowledgement of my identity, and a significant financial compensation package. Are you sure about this? My lawyer asked as,